All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Matt Farry with RealCiSO. I'm joined here with Charlie Wood from Bonadio and Reg Harnish from OrbitalFire. And we're going to go through the small business SOC2 focus, really try to dive into some of the details, clear up some myths, and hopefully any folks watching this can walk away with some tangible to-dos to make sure that number one, a SOC 2 is right for you before you just start diving into it, and what to actually expect when you're going through the process, and then for a lot of folks, what to actually do once you've got a SOC 2 and figure out what to do next. So welcome, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Matt. Thanks for having us.
Of course. So Charlie, I was going to kick this off first with you just sort of introducing, who Bonadio is, your background with SOC 2, and then really introducing us to what a SOC report actually is.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. So I'm Charlie Wood. I'm an executive vice president with the Bonadio Group. I run our FoxPointe Solutions division, and one of the major focus areas are SOC 1s and SOC 2s. So SOC reports, you'll hear the acronym thrown around. There's two different acronyms you generally hear in the SOC space. You'll hear system and organization control. You'll also hear service and organization control. But essentially what the reports are is they enable companies to get confidence that their service providers or potential service providers are operating in an ethical and compliant manner. The AICPA governs the SOC reporting, and as such, CPA firms have to do and issue the SOC reports. But at a high level, SOC reports generally focus on a couple areas. They focus on operations, security, availability, process integrity, confidentiality, and privacy. So that's it at a high level. And then there's also, in addition to a SOC 1 and SOC 2, there's type 1s and type 2s. Type 1 is a point in time test. It's usually a sample of one. We do an audit, we go in there and we look at the design of the control. So we look at a sample of that one test that verifies that the control appears to be designed effectively. You'll see on the reports, it'll say as of this date. So the difference between that and the type 2 is over a period of time. So it's generally 6, 9, or 12 months. And you'll see that on the front of the report too. We've assessed the operational effectiveness of the controls over that period of time. So there's a SOC, there's a type 1, there's a type 2. There's also a SOC 1 and a SOC 2. Those are the most prevalent reports that are issued. A SOC 1 is the old school SAS 70. It is reports on associated with financial reporting. So example, paychecks, right? Paychecks impacts financial reporting and payroll for most companies. So they would have a SOC 1. A SOC 2 is for managed service providers in general, or other service providers that can impact the security, availability, confidentiality, privacy of data. So those reports are the most prevalent. There is a SOC 3, which I don't want to really get into all that much, but all that is really is a summary of the SOC 2.
Okay. And so you've brought up, I think most of what I come across is the SOC 2 and then type 1s and type 2s. Generally, I think the understanding amongst the community is you typically are, especially as a small business, you're typically going to start with a SOC 1 your first go around if it's your first time doing it, and then maybe migrate into a SOC 2. Is that generally an accurate approach?
You generally start with a type 1 and then migrate into a type 2. So the type 1, you stand up the controls, you get them in place, you assign ownership, you write any policies and procedures that you may need. You may need to buy new hardware and software. But the most critical element of the entire SOC process is that upfront. A lot of people think this is going to be a quick and easy process. I just got to write some stuff down and I can push one of these things out quickly, and that's complete misconception about the reports.
Yeah.
The type 2 follows that, and instead of it being as of this date, it's as of this period. So that's the primary sort of difference, and that's how most organizations start.
Yeah. And Reg, I know you're working with small businesses all the time. That's your primary market segment. Is that what you're hearing from your customers?
Well, to be honest, probably less than 5% of my customers are pursuing or experiencing any pressure to work through a SOC process. um, we know that that will change in the future. I feel like the industry has sort of made this SOC 2 in particular a bit of a darling, kind of like multi-factor. So it's kind of blindly and blanketly, um, and enforcing or requiring folks who are in, anyone else's supply chain to understand, contribute to, pursue, and attest to at some point this work. But I think we've certainly got some challenges, no doubt, in the sense that one, while obviously Charlie knows his stuff, my customers don't, and so a big part of our mission is translating a bunch of gibberish from the cybersecurity industry into stuff that means something to small businesses, and typically that comes down to what is a SOC 2? How does it become a competitive asset in terms of their ability to sell their product or service, or maintain their biggest and best customers? Or obviously, if you're investing in SOC 2 related controls, you're probably there's probably some improvement that you can show in other frameworks in other places too. So our job, if and when our customers ask us about this process, partner with folks like Bonadio or others, and help them with preparation and really just understanding, particularly if there's a lengthy observation, like what does this look like? What does auditable evidence look like and artifacts look like? What is the control? What's the intent? How do you interpret this? And so a lot of it for us is really just helping make sense of it for small businesses. Luckily today, like I said, very few of our customers are getting pressure in this space, but we know that that's likely to change in the upcoming year or two.
Yeah. And we've got customers that ask us about it all the time. But I'm curious from you guys, what sort of is the baseline? If I think SOC 2 is right for me, is there like, I know we're talking about service providers here. Is there an industry that it applies to more than another, or a size of an organization? Like, what are really some of the core factors that folks could use to determine if a SOC 2 is right for them at the basic level?
Yeah, I'll take a quick shot. I mean, Charlie's really the expert in this space, but I can tell you, in terms of competitive advantage, there's really two reasons that my customers end up pursuing SOC. The first is that contractually, they have customers, largely this means bigger customers, right? Upstream in their supply chain, who are saying, listen, we're being forced to do this. So guess who else is going to be forced to do this? Pushing that third-party risk down and the assessment and the management of that stuff. And so it's typically from a big existing customer. The second is, and I see this more in the technology space because let's say they've taken in, institutional money, VC money, private equity, where they say, if you're going to scale in the way we expect and produce multiples that we can return and divest of you and make some money, it means that your sales process can't have any hurdles. And so oftentimes for like SaaS providers that we're working with, it could be growth stage, seed stage, Series A, B, but smaller companies who are looking at dramatic, hyper growth, they invest in the SOC 2 because they think that it's going to clear a bunch of barriers and create some competitive advantage in their sales process. And, oftentimes it does. And, and then there are cases certainly when their investors are saying, listen, it's not an option. You're going to go do this. And, but either way, we're helping them with translating that into something that makes sense, translating into an asset for them.
Yeah.
Yeah. From my experience, it's a little bit different. So, we do hundreds of these a year. And so over the past couple of years, we've seen what Reg is talking about. contractual obligations, and we'll see strange things in contracts because people will call us and say, I think I got to be SOC 2 compliant. The term SOC 2 compliant doesn't actually exist. What you really get is a report that either has, an unqualified opinion or a qualified or something worse. Essentially what that means is either the auditor came in and said that things look reasonably fine, or they didn't. There isn't a certification. So our growth has been rooted in people just putting it in contracts. In October of last year, we actually saw a contract that said SAS 70 or something equivalent. SAS 70 has been gone for years. So people are sort of jamming it in to the contract, and now it's being required. One of the issues we see, and Reg, I'd love to hear your opinion on this, when they get that, they have a relatively small window to put those controls in place. Generally, hey, you have within the next 6 to 12 months to get a report issued. And what we have seen over the past 2 years, software companies coming out saying, hey, I can get you SOC 2 compliant in 30 days. And that's just, you're circumventing what the spirit of the SOC is, and that's stand up real tangible controls that will be, there for the long term and help provide reasonable comfort around those things we talked about before: security, operational control. So Reg, I'd love to hear your opinion about that and what you see in that space.
Well, I think there's misuse and abuse on both sides of that coin. One, certainly, everyone wants a six pack and no one wants to do sit-ups. So, the blue pill tends to be very attractive in this industry because the alternative, requires a lot of time, money, and energy. So absolutely, we see organizations who are just looking to shortcut the process. One, because they don't understand it and they don't really consider it an asset. But two, they are not really being required to do anything else. That leads me to the problem on the other side of the coin, which is this sort of thoughtless expectations of everyone in your supply chain needing a SOC 2, which obviously is not the case. I see a lot of organizations just throwing this in contracts, as you just mentioned, and having no idea of what their data flow looks like. This particular provider, do they take custody of an asset? Like, we often get, I won't say often, on occasion, we get the question about SOC 2 and we say, listen, we're not even connected to you. Like, we don't take custody of anything. We don't have access. There's nothing here that would require us to, even if we went through the process, it would be meaningless to you. So I think there needs to be a better, more education and a better definition of who truly benefits from a SOC report, both on the require as well as the requiree side. Because right now it tends to be this kind of just catch-all where people are just requiring it, even if they don't know what it is. And then people are trying to escape it, even when it can be an asset for their organization.
Yeah. Is there a defensible position if a customer's coming and saying, hey, I think I need to be SOC 2 because XYZ in my supply chain, somebody bigger than me is telling me that I need to get this. Is there something advisory wise that we would say, hey, you should probably ask some amplifying information from this person that's requiring it? Or do they just blindly jump in and say, well, here we go, let's get SOC 2?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked, because when we hear one of our customers is being required to report, we're like, who asked you that? And let us at them, because they clearly don't understand this process and what it's intended to do. Now, on occasion, we've run into situations where, let's say our customer is a financial services organization and they're managing payroll or other direct deposit and stuff like that, where it's like, okay, this can make sense, but let's approach this in a thoughtful way such that when you come out the other side of this, you're not just checking a contractual checkbox, but rather you're building an asset that can help you in all different areas of the business. I find that people who, whether it's SOC or ISO or others, if they really invest the time in building an asset, they learn a lot about their business and they come out the other side of that process with something that's really very reusable across their entire business. But oftentimes when we start to get questions, and maybe it could be for an ISO, SOC, it could be a lot of different things. But we say, let us, please make the introduction to your customer. And coordinate a meeting with us so we can ask some questions about where this requirement is coming from. What is their expectation in terms of timing? And really sort of advocate for our customers, because again, in my experience, 9 out of 10 questionnaires and contractual obligations that my customers experience are just thoughtless boilerplate contract language, or, not to demonize kids out of college, but some kid out of college working for a bank who is, assigned to the third-party risk team is just went off and just, spamming everyone with these SOC requests. So again, I come back to it. We really need, as an industry, we've not done our constituents many favors. I think we owe them education and a real process for determining who really should be subject to a SOC and who can it benefit.
And Reg, we see the same thing. I mean, we have dozens of customers that have come to us and said, "Hey, I got a contract that says I need to do this," and we'll get on the phone with the customer or their auditors and talk them through why we don't think that they need it. Now, at the end of the day, we're all for everybody putting in the appropriate controls, but if there's a contractual obligation that doesn't align to the services that they offer, that's where we try to push back and get their thought process. And a lot of times it's what you said. The new kid out of college with a checklist, going down the checklist. I need an SSA 18. I need a SOC 1. He doesn't really know what he's asking. So, we've been able to help our customers in that fashion too. But getting to the point you were making, like, you got to go and ask the next question before you blindly go out and just start trying to put controls in place or become, quote unquote, SOC compliant.
All right. So let's say we've determined as a company it is the right thing for us to pursue. It's our first time going through any type of audit experience. We haven't done ISO or anything else before. What are some of the baseline hurdles or the most common hurdles that you guys are seeing from small businesses that are pursuing this for the first time? Charlie, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, so we generally come in after someone like Reg, but the thing that we see is, we come in, we do the audit, and we leave, and they just think that things are fine. They don't realize, like, this is an ongoing process that you got to continuously assess your risk in the changing environment and make sure that you align your controls going forward for the next audit. A lot of times people see us leave and they're like, good, we're done, and controls fall down, quite frankly. That's our biggest challenge. The other thing is time. Like, to do this stuff right, you've got to assign the right leadership. You've got to put the time in, the education, with the great resignation, significant turnover at our customers. New people would come in, wouldn't know what the process was, and that negatively impacts the audit. And we've issued a number of SOC 2s with varying opinions based on that. So time's a big issue for most of our customers, and that false sense of, I passed the last one, I'll be fine this time.
And I think for us, once the decision's been made to move forward, where we really can help is certainly in preparation and readiness for Charlie, but also I think we are, again, in the spirit of advocating for our customers, let's figure out what the scope of this thing really is. Partially because we don't want our customers undergoing needless or valueless cyber expenses and activities, but also partially because we want to take what they're doing with the SOC exercise and map and align that to something that's a little more, I'll say a little broader applicability, like NIST or something like that. Most of our customers are adopting one of maybe 4 frameworks, and NIST is in there. So, and actually NIST 171, not NIST Cyber. And so we want to figure out, as part of this exercise, how can we support and maybe improve or certainly align what we're doing with NIST or HIPAA or something else with this the SOC exercise. Again, my customers don't have a lot of cycles or a lot of experience or expertise in cybersecurity. And so it's our job to come in and really help advocate for them, in some ways protect them from needless activity and expense, but also there's a certain inevitability to all of this. Like, listen, we're not crazy. We know that it doesn't matter what our opinion is at some point. If their best customer is demanding a SOC, even if there's no justification for it, at some point this customer may decide, forget it. I'm just going to go through with it. I can't risk losing this customer. So at that point, it's as their virtual cybersecurity team, it's our job to figure out, how do we turn this into something positive? It's going to be expensive. It's probably going to be a headache. It's going to take 6 months. But how do we turn this into something positive that we can leverage over and over again across the business?
Yeah. And I know, having been on both sides of it myself before, that the best intentions, I feel like I remember when I was a pup in cybersecurity, Reg, and you were teaching me everything. You said, I'd love a very similar to everybody wants the six pack, but nobody's willing to do the work. I wish that I could sell cybersecurity for the sake of cybersecurity, but at the end of the day, nobody wants to do this. It's an overhead expense to a business. And Charlie, with you bringing up that the time factor, the commitment to making this happen, and not just the first time, but then year 2 plus, what are some of the ways that you guys have either seen or experienced that I wish that I could get my management on board with this, but at the end of the day, it's a small group of people that are wearing 80 different hats, and they only have so much time to dedicate to making this thing as pure as it can be for their business. Is there advice or guidance that you give somebody to make this actually mean something and not just be the checkbox exercise?
Yeah, from my perspective, we'll go back to them and say, you need somebody like Reg. You need somebody in here periodically looking at this to ensure the controls continue to operate effectively. Because, if you're a 5-person shop and you're wearing 10 hats, there's no way you're going to remember to sign off on this, that, or the other thing, right? To ensure the control is evidenced appropriately. You've got real work that you need to worry about. So having somebody like Reg and his company, on standby to help out in any manner has been effective and efficient for our customers. We, as an accounting firm, have to toe the line of independence, so we can't really tell them how to fix their problems. But most of the time, especially the last 2 years, problems have been directly related to resource constraints.
Yeah, and I would argue, and it's kind of sounding like a love fest all of a sudden, but I think having a CPA firm that takes a pragmatic approach to this, obviously needs to be of high integrity, and there's, the AICP standards don't allow for a ton of wiggle room. But I think there are, and listen, anyone who's followed me on social media for any length of time knows that I used to beat up on CPAs all day long for dabbling in cybersecurity. So, Charlie, if you ever saw that, I apologize. The reality is that cyber security and financial accounting could not be more different, right? Financial accounting is binary. It's either a 1 or it's not. Cyber is completely gray, 100% gray. From managing risk to control efficacy to compliance, it's all gray. So when, back in the day, and I'm really talking about sort of like mid 2010s, when I was making CPA firms punching bags, but they would come in and they would expect this sort of, I don't even know how to describe it, but this sort of obfuscated perfection on a system that fluctuates and has variances and has bad days, and is not anything like counting ones and zeros or dollars and cents. So I think finding the right CPA firm is also really important. It's got to align with your intent, of course, but also I think culturally there are lots of different CPA firms out there with a different approach to auditability and evidence and artifacts and observation. And so I know there's standards, but in my experience, there are good CPA firms that really understand it and can do this pragmatically. And then there are firms who are just reading a book, stayed at a Holiday Inn and just running through this practice. And it's, but it's not like anywhere else, unlike anywhere else in cybersecurity, we see the same thing. So this is really no different.
Makes sense to me. Find the right firm. We've got one of them with us today. All right, so the next one we're coming up with here is not necessarily directly SOC2 related, but the age-old debate, at least as far as I've seen it, of should I be doing the right things? Should I be doing the control in practice before I document what I should be doing? Or like many of the regulations state, you need to have a documented policy and a documented procedure before you can actually have an effective program. And the reason I wanted to put this in here, especially with small businesses, growth stage startups, whatever you might have it, is that things can change so quickly in the way that a business is functioning when they're trying to figure out exactly what makes the most sense for them, that at least for a lot of our customers, we could see we'll document a policy or a procedure for them of how they're doing something, and then tomorrow it changes and they end up having to update their documentation 50 times throughout a year, which is just another overhead time expense for them. So I'm curious, Reg, if you want to start us off on that.
Yeah, well, listen, this is our experience every single day. So I will admit, well, first of all, if we agree that the policy itself is also a control and it can also change, that, yeah, we're for most of our customers, they're painting the plane as they're flying it, So we definitely experienced a situation where policy may be partially or significantly aspirational on any given day. But for us, and the way we counsel our customers is, this is not a beauty contest. And we think defensibility, meaning if a third party asks you about your cybersecurity program, SOC or not, and you tell them what you're doing, well, they better shake their head and say, okay, that seems reasonable and appropriate. That's enough. We'll work with you, or we'll sell you insurance, or we're not going to terminate our contract, whatever. And I think that there is sort of this purist aspect to cybersecurity where, I think huge swaths of the industry would expect even a small business to apply all 1,100 NIST 53 controls. And if you go through that catalog, you're looking at it, it's like, it's completely irrelevant, not applicable, like irrelevant, not applicable. And so I think what we owe small businesses in this context, in terms of SOC, but also just generally in cybersecurity, is a way to scale this down. It's really been our mission for almost 3 years now to take cybersecurity and not dilute it, but rather refactor it in a way where it can be applied effectively to small organizations, because they really don't have the same level of detail. Their supply chains are shallower. Their data architecture is simpler. Just their surface area and their complexity is completely different. And we don't really have a model. And I would say not even the CIS, controls really approach that. I think they take one interesting perspective in terms of capability, but I think when it comes down to it, we really need to start to think about, how do we make cyber work for, by the way, the other 99.87% of all businesses in this country. And, the SOC is no exception. It's for the couple of customers, I think there's maybe 5, but it's less than 5% for us, who came to us and said, hey, I just got this. It looks like I'm gonna have to do a SOC 2. Everyone kind of like heavy breathing and, sheds a tear, gnashes teeth. And I just don't think we do a good job of translating this and scaling it down to these small organizations, which make up the vast majority of all businesses, in all data, in all processing, in all employees in the country. I think the industry's completely fallen down in that space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I've seen, I can recall specifically the RSA conference. A lot of large mammoth corporation CEOs were coming in talking about third-party supply chain management and risk, and how they were going to start supporting the third, fourth, and fifth parties by doing the right thing. But even generally speaking, the cost access point, or the complexity access point of some of even the basic tooling that the small businesses would need, they can't afford, or they don't have the manpower to actually put it into place. But Charlie, from your point, I know a lot with auditing, the once the readiness is done and I feel like I'm good to go and have you guys come in, back to sort of the do the activity versus document the activity. It's been my experience that typically from an audit perspective, the first thing that an auditor is going to ask me for is, where's your document? And then the follow-up is, now show me that you're doing that thing. Is that the approach that is pretty much standard across auditing that you know of? And is there any wiggle room to how that's being done?
Well, yeah, I mean, in general, that's the way it's done. I mean, we're QSA firm, and PCI requires stuff to be written down. We're also high trust assessors. High trust requires it in black and white, exactly the way it's stated in their control framework. But when it comes to SOC, you do need to use reasonableness when you're talking to people and you're looking at the organization from a size, complexity, really a risk perspective. Like, I've been here 15 years with the Bonadio Group. I mean, I know you're recording this, but I haven't read our policies in probably 10. Does that make me less secure or more secure if I had read them? It doesn't. So when we do these audits, we do inquiry procedures. Hey, tell me about how you control changes to your database, right? And now change management's in everything, right? It's in every law, regulation, and standard. At the end of the day, if they can articulate to us what they do, they can demonstrate it to us. You might have a finding because it's not documented, but it's not probably a significant enough finding where we're going to modify our opinion, either individually and in the aggregate. What we care about generally as auditors in the SOC2 space specifically is the control in place. Does the person know what the control is? Because if it's written down and you're brand new and don't know the process, you're in worse shape than you were if it was. So to us, we use reasonableness when we do these audits, because at the end of the day, it's a risk-based audit. If you know it, it's in place and operating effectively, awesome. If it's not written down, when you get some time, write it down. We'll put it as a management letter comment and or a finding that's probably not going to change our opinion in the report.
Yeah, I'll let them know. Hey, Charlie, HR just called. They want to talk to you after the webcast.
They sit right outside my office. Pretty sure they can hear it through the vent.
That's that.
That's them knocking.
Yeah, and it's funny. I've talked to a lot of auditors over the years, and Reg, I feel like this kind of goes back to you. Finding the right firm that understands what they're doing really is, I think, an underrated or undervalued exercise where, especially for somebody going through it, small company going through it for the first time, I'd say 9.9 out of 10 times their first question is, who's the cheapest audit firm I can find to get this done? Because budget's the number one factor. Obviously, at least to me, that's not necessarily the right question to ask. But if I was looking for somebody to, kind of this courting period of an audit firm, is there any guidance that I can give to my customers or to the general population out there of what they should be looking for in sort of the questions they could ask, or whatever it might be, finding the right audit firm for me?
Well, certainly there's some basics like general capability and credibility and references. I mean, the stuff that's obvious. But I think with capability comes the ability to be pragmatic. So obviously, again, Charlie been doing this a long time. If you just started doing this a year ago, you don't have enough context and experience to lean on to say, what does reasonable really look like? You know what I mean? Because you lack context. And so it's really hard to better align with your customer. But I do think culture is often overlooked, and you want someone who treats the exercise in the same way that the customer does as well. Do they feel like it's urgent? Do they feel like they want to, maximize accuracy and completeness? And then just as human beings, again, I think it gets overlooked, but do they see the world the way the customer does in a lot of ways? So I think, first of all, there's a lot of folks doing what we do. I mean, cybersecurity in general, not necessarily the SOC or, small business cybersecurity, but there are a lot of options out there, and that can be good and bad. The bad is you've got a huge pile of stuff to filter through. The good is eventually, if you look hard enough, you're probably going to find someone that you feel is capable, kind of aligns with your culture and your objectives, and is going to get the work done in a way that, is empathic, that they're treating the customer the way they would want to be treated.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to build off that, Reg, like if you got a small customer and they're looking, to go down the road of, becoming, again, quote unquote, SOC compliant, find an accounting firm that's going to offer you a manager or a director level to oversee the day-to-day work, and not just a first year reading a checklist off a spreadsheet, because that's what so many times you see. And that's where the problems rise, if you're not using reasonableness to get to the spirit of the control objective. You're being rigid and going, well, the checkbox says this. So try to find a firm that's got director and manager out there in the weeds with the people, trying to help them get to where they need to be. You can't design the controls, but you can certainly tell them what other people of similar size and complexity do. And you can use your years of experience, as Reg said, to get to that end line with the customer. And it doesn't have to be an adversarial relationship of a customer versus auditor. I mean, that's just, those days to me should be gone, because depending on the size of the organization you're working with, should be more of a team sort of approach, because the AICPA put these controls in place, or issued these controls that you can dice up any way you want, because the spirit is to try to make them more secure and give their customers reasonable comfort relative to security and all the other trust criteria. So to me, it should be more of a partnership than as I said before, an adversarial type relationship.
Yeah, I know I've seen or heard the sort of the expression when the relationship of the customer auditor comes into play, where on the auditor side, if an auditor doesn't find something wrong, they're not doing their job right. And when customers have that mentality going into this relationship, it's everybody's got their shields up before anything is even being done. And is it your feeling that from a cybersecurity standpoint that's still sort of being done today, or are you starting to see the trending where auditors can be on the partnership side of it a bit more?
Well, I think if you look at the sheer numbers and the growth of these types of exercises, I think people are trusting their CPAs more. But certainly there's no shortage of, and I mean, certainly we live through it as well, advocating for our customers, because it's part of our offering, depending on what package they are in. We sit in those audits. We are their cybersecurity team. So when my customer gets audited, we're right there defending our assessment score or, our methodology or whatever, they're, asking about. And so it can be adversarial. I think, I don't know. I don't know if it's gotten any better or not. I think the sheer volume of SOC and other assessments and audits that are going on right now has, changed things maybe a little bit. But I think that typically happens when the auditor has less experience and maybe is nervous themselves or feel like you said, they're getting paid by the finding. Those types of arrangements tend to go a little sideways. But I think even, when we're involved, we can say, hey, listen, let's set the stage here before you ask a single question or ask for a single, bit of evidence. We're all on the same team here, and let's, treat each other, respectfully. We're going to do our best. We know that there's no such thing as perfection, and we hope you know that as well. And we're going to get through this productively so everyone gets to go home and look at themselves in the mirror at night. I think, yeah. And again, I accept some of this blame. I'm part of the cybersecurity industry, and there's just a sort of a lot of purist approach. And I think we've got to get away from that. And I think just given the sheer deficit of talent, especially experienced talent, it makes it hard for newcomers to really make an impact in a positive way. Yeah,
I dig it. So last few minutes here, I wanted to wrap up with, it's a kind of a circling back a little bit. I made it through my first either SOC2 Type 1 or Type 2, and I'm going on to year 2+. What are some of the things that I should be either looking into or expecting on some of my future SOC evaluations? Charlie, if you want to launch us there.
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned earlier, what we've seen historically is you've done this year one, you walk out the door, you kind of forget about it for a little bit. So to me, one of the things that we always tell our customers, let's have regular cadence calls. Right? Let's do it monthly, quarterly, whatever you think. And at that point, we'll, a half hour, like here were the controls, here are the things that we told you you could work on, and, management letter comments. Where are you with those? Have you had any turnover? Has the turnover impacted any of the controls? If you start doing that, the first quarter on a monthly basis, generally keeps people moving the ball down the field. If you wait 6 months, people will panic, say, oh, this guy left, and no, we really haven't done this, that, or the other thing, and they start, getting a little less open and honest about things. And again, it doesn't build that collaborative effort that we talked about a few minutes ago. So regular meetings up front, just to talk things, get that in your engagement letter. When you're a small business, most accounting firms shouldn't charge you for a half-hour conversation on a monthly basis because they need that information when they do the audit. So it's things to think about, and those are the things that we see that are most effective if it's year two of any type of engagement in the audit space.
Yeah, I agree. I think if we want our customers to think of this as a continuous effort, then we should be doing the same thing. I agree with Charlie.
All right. This is sort of a maybe a from left field question, but something that, being in the space myself from sort of a compliance tech standpoint, that I've had lots of conversations with other audit firms on, the tooling or the tool sets that are available out there with automated evidence gathering and sort of AI integration with getting SOC2 ready, and I basically just have to click a button and it's going to do all the stuff for me. I'm curious, Charlie, from your perspective of dealing with the outputs from those things, or whatever it looks like for you, in reality, how are they helping or hurting what the endeavors are?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we do have some companies that use automated tools to extract things like password, power users, and some of the other things. Also, we'll grab tickets out of like Jira or something else. There was a big push last year, and we're an accounting firm, so we get audited too. We have peer reviews, and there was a big push, and the ICPA, basically had our peer reviewers come in, and they really wanted to focus on completeness and accuracy. So you start taking those automated tools, and some are great. They've got their own SOC report. Some are easy to use, and you can do the completeness and accuracy testing yourself quickly while on site. Others you can't. And with the turnover we talked about before, a lot of times people don't the people that set it up aren't even there anymore. So it's extracting stuff, and it's like, well, how do you know this is complete and accurate? And they go, I don't know, it's always been set up that way. So that's not a very good answer. So we generally have to do a little bit more in the completeness and accuracy space, but there are some tools that we've seen that are very good, and we've never had any problems with. So again, it's about using reasonableness and doing a risk-based approach to when you're looking at things and trying to understand the environment.
Yeah, and so my takeaway or my sum up from that, if I'm understanding correctly, is there are some opportunities to gain speed with the evidence collection on the readiness side, but at the end of the day, there still needs to be somebody on the customer side who's reviewing what's actually being gathered to make sure it's the right stuff, the completeness, and not just sort of a push the button, here you go, auditor, good luck.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things we see with our competitors, quite frankly, is they're not doing the due diligence. They're just accepting it. They got a SOC report for this software solution. Okay, but the SOC stops it, you set it up, right? Now management's responsibility to ensure that the information that's being extracted is complete, accurate, and valid. And a lot of times it's not explained to them. It's just sold to them like, you're done. You don't have to do anything, and it'll just dump it there, and your auditors will love it. So yeah, there's still a human element to it. And there's obviously a reasonableness element from the auditor's perspective to try to get the comfort that they need to ensure, again, it's complete, accurate, and valid.
All right. Anything to add there, Reg?
No, I think, for us, one of the things that we try to help our customers with, and the way we talk about it is, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, you should be doing the absolute minimum in cybersecurity to protect your business mission, but no less. And that's a real challenge. Again, I think this is an industry of excess and purism in a lot of ways. But if you're really effectively managing risk and your business at the same time, I think that happy medium tends to be the absolute minimum that you need to do to protect your business and its mission, but no less. And I think, hopefully we're headed in that direction where there's a little bit better balance, a little more pragmatism, and really helping, our constituents answer the question, was it worth it?
Yeah. All right. I think that's run us through our time and our questions. I appreciate you guys joining us, and we look forward to doing this again with something new and fresh.
Well, I'm honored to be here, and I just can't say enough how much I admire you for being willing to take this from the potty.
Yeah, well, like I said, everything's within an arm's reach when you live in a van. All right, guys.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you, Charlie.
That's nice meeting you, buddy.
Take care.
Take care, Matt.